In today's episode, Penny and Rebecca share some specific feedback with us with regards to 529 ABLE plans and setting up a special needs trust. Then we get a chance to roll out Brad's Barrett profit and loss statement, a useful tool when calculating your savings rate. Welcome to the ultimate crowdsourced personal finance show. This is your Friday Roundup.
You're listening to ChooseFI Radio. The blueprint for financial independence lives here. If you're looking to unlock the secrets to financial independence and early retirement, you're in the right place. Stay tuned and join a community of like-minded people who are getting off the hamster wheel and taking control of their lives in the pursuit of financial independence. ChooseFI, your home for financial independence online.
So much to talk about in our first Friday Roundup of 2019. Man, it's going to take some time to get used to saying that. It's unbelievable. And to help me with this, I have my co-host Brad here with me today. How you doing, buddy?
Hey, Jonathan, I'm doing quite well. Happy New Year and welcome back to the U.S.
Yeah, no kidding. So as you kind of were referencing, I was with my family for the last 20 days, which I should point out is a significant number because in past years, it was the total amount of time that I would get in my annual vacation or paid time off. That was the annual amount of time that I had allotted. And for both sick time and vacation time. And I certainly wasn't allowed to take it all together. But this year, for the first time ever, I was able to take 20 days and spend it with my wife's family in Zimbabwe. We had a truly African Christmas. It was just amazing. And I'm back. This is the one downside, Brad. It was a 28 hours end to end navigating the airport system with a 19-month-old.
Ouch. Oh, man. Did the little guy sleep at all?
No, it was so brutal. Like, he did his best. I'll give him credit. He was not the worst person there, but that was a very low bar. And it was horrible. There's just no getting around it. I've never felt so drained after getting off the flight. We were on Ethiopian Airlines, and to their credit, it is a wonderful airline. They did a fantastic job. I was very happy with the service, but 28 hours end to end with a 19-month-old, not a fun experience.
Yikes. And then you're recording 24 hours later. So, well, welcome back. I'm very impressed that you can even talk and put coherent sentences together. So that's very cool.
Well, Brad, I think that just kind of indicates how excited I am about the show every single time that we get ready to do this. It's truly my favorite part of the day. Tell us a little bit about the past couple weeks for you. Did you have a nice family vacation?
Yeah, I really did. And I actually had my own vacation since you were out of the country. So I didn't have to.
Our vacations do tend to be aligned.
Yeah, it worked out really well. So yeah, we had front loaded a bunch of Friday roundups. So we haven't actually recorded in almost a month, which it's pretty wild. But yeah, my family and I, we had a great time. Mostly low key. We actually did travel up to Long Island, New York to visit our extended family, but it was just a really short trip, but it was nice. We got to spend Christmas Eve with Laura's family and then Christmas Day with my family. We got to each see a bunch of longtime friends we hadn't seen in years. And the girls got to see their cousins. So it was just a really nice time. And yeah, Jonathan, you'll love this. We got 12 new board games and card games for Christmas.
12 board games?
Yeah. Not exactly the most FI thing we could do, but we are kind of like slowly introducing them actually. So we've started out with a game called Sushi Go, which I'm not sure if you've ever heard of, but it's
yes.
Okay, cool. Yeah, it's a past cards game and really quick. It probably takes sub 10 to 15 minutes once you get the hang of it. So that's a nice little one. And then we actually just got Splendor, which have you played that one?
I had purchased this game at the beginning of last year. I tried to play it myself, but was having trouble getting through the rule book. I actually, there was a special on it and I actually got it for the iOS device and I was playing it on the flight and it was phenomenal. I love it. So now I actually can't wait to go back and play the game that's actually on my shelf. That is a absolutely fantastic game.
Oh, wow. You're kidding. So you literally just started playing it on the flight, like the 28-hour flight yesterday?
Yes. Before you told me that you got 12 board games, I was actually playing that game. It was,
that's funny.
It got me through about 2 hours of the 28-hour insanity.
Yeah. Okay. Well, yeah, we absolutely love it. We're just bombing through like game after game. I think we opened it 4 days ago. We've probably played it 15 to 20 times at this point. So yeah, it's really, really cool. And, that's just the nice thing about kind of like our little lives here. We just have this nice family time, and we haven't done anything spectacular. The girls were off for a couple of weeks, and I really can't point to like any remarkable thing we did other than, like I said, going up to New York. But it was just a really good time. And yeah, sadly, they go back to school tomorrow, and we're kind of back to real life.
All right. So dare I ask, that was 2 of the games, and in particular with Splendor, that one I personally can highly recommend. I'm curious that you said 12 games. Do you by any chance recall the names of the other 10?
All right. I actually did write them down because I had a sense that you might ask me this. So Laura is actually a member of this like Facebook group where she scouts out all these games. So she did a bunch of research in this. So we got, I suspect a lot of these will be familiar to you. We got Santorini, Azul. We got Catan Dice. So it's like a quick dice game instead of playing the full out Settlers of Catan game. We got Zeus on the Loose, Cover Your Assets, which is some like financial-ish type game. We got Lost Cities, Dutch Blitz, Flux, and then a couple of random ones for the kids. They got Battleship, which I guess is kind of an old school game, and this Super Mario card game, which is probably ridiculous. We have no idea anything about that, but we had gotten that little NES classic a couple years back, and the girls just love playing the old Mario Brothers, so kind of got that for them for just a fun little thing. That brings us to 12.
Well, you guys are going to be busy for quite some time. I've heard good things about Santorini too. Of the ones on that list, that's the only other one that I am familiar with. But cool, man. Thanks for sharing. All right, man. Well, let's go ahead and hop into this past week's episode and talk a little bit about this kind of complicated idea of planning for your child's special needs and knowing what vehicles are out there to make this process a little bit easier. I was very grateful for William for distilling this because, frankly, this is not information that is easy to find. This isn't something that you can just, Google. It's not going to work right away. You're going to have to do a lot of research. And I think by him setting the frame, it tells a compelling story, and it gives you a place to send people if they're saying, I know this is something I need to look at either for my child, or I know somebody that's grappling with this, but I don't know where to send them, where to start. I think this does it for us. And I'm going to be very interested to get your feedback on this episode as well.
Yeah, I agree with you. For me, I have no insight into these accounts or these trusts, but William gave me a starting place. And the 529 ABLE, the special needs trusts, I had never heard of these things. So, I mean, he went into great detail, and frankly, it was over my head just because I have not researched this at all. But now anyone in the future can start there. And I think he gave really interesting insights and actionable tips, even like the special needs trust, right? He was saying it gives him an ability and people an ability to shield money from your child, in essence, so they can still participate in things like Social Security, disability, and Medicaid, and not be kicked off because they have access to a lot of assets, right? And you talk about the value of trust generally. These are the people who need these trusts. They should not be kicked off or kicked out of their home or wherever. William mentioned that. Like, talk about a catastrophe if when he passes, just because his kids get assets, that they get removed from this place where they've lived for years. I mean, that makes so little sense to me. And it's wonderful that not only William can plan ahead, but thousands upon thousands of people who can benefit from this are able to plan ahead now just by knowing that that vehicle exists.
Yes. And talking about flexibility, you have to do this forward planning for them. The flexibility that we talk about in the FI community, that is gone in this situation. That William's kids aren't going to be able to navigate this without them. And so William is taking the time to build us a roadmap to show you how he is doing his best to safeguard his kids' care and their financial care and their well-being over a period of 30, 40, 50 years and beyond. That is remarkable. And it's such a critical conversation. And I loved how he was able to help us think through this. I mean, imagine being in the fortunate position that you have actually been able to establish or create for yourself this perpetual money-making machine. You've been able to create for yourself this level of financial independence that can support you for the rest of time. But knowing that without some of these other vehicles, all of that could just disappear within a relatively short period of time. And your kids that are going to rely on this in this particular situation won't have access to it. How do you get from here to there to know that when you're gone, your legacy continues and they're going to be okay? That's what he was helping us build this map for, because he's had to do this. He's had to create this. And I just think that episode, it's able to go into a very granular level, the actions you're going to need to implement and to consider. And I love the fact that he was able to even show us these income limits that you should be considering. Let's just imagine you're in an incredibly fortunate situation where you have, I don't know, $2 million in some sort of legacy that you can leave for your kids. But because you've done that, because you've done it without knowing about some of these other vehicles that are available, suddenly they are no longer get any access to any sort of state aid, any sort of state care, and they no longer have that safety net. That's scary. It's very scary for them. And so he's helping us think through, for individuals that have to deal with this, how do you take care of yourself? And then once you have yourself okay, how do you make sure that the individuals that are going to be relying on this legacy are going to be able to benefit from it? And I think if you piece together, okay, first, build up your investments, develop a savings rate. You got to create this first, right? It doesn't come out of nowhere. You have to build this. And then once you have it, learn how to navigate the 529 ABLE, learn how to navigate special needs trust, learn how to do the timing of this. He indicated to us that the timing of this is critical. Like, you want to set up your special needs trust now, but you don't want to fund it now. This was a really, really key point, because trust fund babies, quote unquote, right? Trust fund babies and trust, this is going to be taxed at essentially the highest marginal tax bracket, that all the tax brackets are incredibly compressed. So you don't want to fund this thing and have to pay those tax brackets until you actually need it. And the key to this whole process is to fund the special needs as part of executing your will. That was a massive insight for me. And I think that's going to be valuable for a lot of people that are listening to this.
Yeah. And you also use the phrase there, think through. I think that's the big takeaway for me. And it should transcend just this particular situation and should be applicable to everyone in the FI community, is think through your situation. There are quote unquote rules, right? Like we jokingly say, oh, max out your pre-tax buckets. That's what Jonathan and I, as podcasters, speaking very generally, would say. That said, if you're in a 0% marginal tax bracket, then you probably want to max out your Roth IRA. Right? So when we're talking in generalities, it's easy to try to give our best advice, but every situation is different. And William's talking about this very specifically. He's moving his money now to Roth IRAs, since, like you said, Jonathan, the trust, that tax bracket's going to be the absolute highest. William was saying 35% or higher. And he said, quote, I've tried to shelter their assets from taxes just as well as I've tried to shelter my own. Sometimes that might mean doing something different than you've done all along. Of course, it's situational, and I can't give any of the thousands of different options right now. And you have special circumstances that are unique to you.
Yeah, and that was a part of it. I mean, if someone were to go kind of parse that information, the little bits that were in there was the 529 ABLE plan is going to be basically the place to start for most individuals that are hearing that and applying that to their situation. But there's some limitations on the 529 ABLE, because you're always balancing this in the fact that at some point your assets can then hurt your ability to qualify for state aid. And so with the 529 ABLE plan, in that case, the limitation was $100K in assets. So it makes sense to start there and fund that account until you're approaching that $100,000. And then once you're exceeding that's when the special needs trust came into play, and it gives you a way to fund much more than that. And William was making the kind of obvious point that based on the 4% rule, $100K in assets isn't going to be enough to support a lifestyle that's going to require significant care and assistance. And you know what, Brad, I wanted to take a second to talk about a comment that we got from CastBox. We actually have a fair number of people that use this application to listen to the podcast. And what's cool about it is it actually lets you leave comments on specific episodes. And this one was a follow-up on the episode with William. And this is from Rebecca. And she says, I love your podcast, and this episode is especially poignant for me. I'm the mother of a special needs son, and this has been weighing on me for several years. Initially, we had a 529 account for him, and we wanted to rotate it into an ABLE account. However, the state had one, and so did Fidelity. After reading the recommended book, The Simple Path to Wealth, I was fired up. Both of the ABLE accounts have high expense ratios. They are in portfolios, so you don't get to pick the funds. They're actively managed accounts, so both the state and Fidelity, have quarterly fees of $11 to $15. I asked to waive the quarterly fees in lieu of accessing it online and was told they could not, and it was mandatory to send the quarterly updates. So this frustrated me, especially in light of the high expense ratios. I'm trying to save every cent as most of our discretionary funds are used up in various therapies and upkeep of our son. Our insurance deductible alone for his therapy jumped from $8,000 in 2018 to $13,000 in 2019. I rotated back to the 529 educational plan as their expense ratio was mild and with no monthly fees. I'm hoping to keep it there and contribute as much as I can. Eventually, I'll turn it into a trust or rotate it to the ABLE plan later when the rates get better. To date, Vanguard does not have an ABLE account. The only ones I know about are Fidelity in my home state of Nevada. Please let me know if there are any changes that I'm not aware of. So I took this question, I went ahead and ran it by William just to see if he had any insight on this. And I got his feedback on this. And William said that the ABLE accounts in general, they're run by the state. Each state has their own set of available investment funds and their own fee structures, just kind of like the 529s in different state. But the ABLE accounts are restricted to one per person. Now, it's new enough and niche enough that to the best of his knowledge, there isn't a central collection of them. Ohio has a very decent plan with Vanguard funds and offers the state the tax deduction. So, he's not currently aware. It might be nice if we could, Brad, over time, maybe start to aggregate some of this data so that people maybe have like a good reference. So I don't know if that answers your question, Rachel, but it might just be, unfortunately, in this case, your options are limited to move or vote. And this reminds me, Brad, because it is so hard to aggregate this information, to be honest with you, no one has really taken this on. In fact, we were talking with Dan at Chautauqua. So we went to Chautauqua back in October, and Dan has a brother with special needs and was saying he lives in Canada and I can't find this, in his words, I can't find this information anywhere. No one has aggregated it. It's so hard to get answers. And so Dan was actually looking into building a website to start to, at least for Canada, start to aggregate some of this information and give people a place to go. There's a lot of websites out there dedicated to maybe specific resources, one-offs, but nobody's looking at it from a comprehensive financial picture, much the way that the FI community has put together informations that are pursuing financial independence. There hasn't been this same sort of aggregation for people that are pursuing this for their children with special needs. And that was really something that he felt called to. And I know it's something that he's working on for this year. I will wait till he gives me an update on that to see if I can point people to it in the future. But play this out. This is critical. And you don't get a mulligan, right? I mean, whatever you leave, whatever legacy you leave, your dependents, those with special needs, will be directly tied to the plan that you lay now while you're actually able to. To not do so can be devastating on multiple levels, financially, from a health perspective, from a care perspective.
Yeah, and it's great that Dan saw this need personally and took the mantle and said, I'm going to create this for Canada, right? For people like me who need this information. And yeah, hopefully somebody out there steps up for the US and other countries. This is information that needs to be aggregated. And for whatever bizarro reason, it just hasn't been. So yeah, hopefully people can crowdsource this and put it together so every single person researching it doesn't have to reinvent the wheel.
But you know what? The other thing is putting a spotlight on it often forces competition and often will make people take a change. Because imagine having an aggregate of all the different states' ABLE plans, which wouldn't take an insanely long amount of time to build. It'd do a lot of searches, but you could put it all together and then grading them and then giving this to the media, giving this to a reporter. Imagine what they can do with that. Do you want to be the state that cares the least about your kids with special needs? I mean, is that really where you want to rank? And then what changes would you make if that actually were broadcasted to tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of people? It wouldn't take long for that to shift. I guarantee it.
Yeah, that's a great idea. You see those type of rankings all the time for the traditional 529 college plans. It highlights the great plans, and then it also puts a spotlight on the people who are charging exorbitant fees and such. And yeah, that's actually really, really interesting. I hope someone does step up, and who knows, maybe we can have that written for the ChooseFI website as well. I mean, that's incredibly valuable.
Oh man, I love it. Together, minds come together and things will happen. That will be a goal for this year. I think we can definitely help with that. And at bare minimum, if someone has already done it, if you email us the work that you've done on this, we would love to publicize it for you. I can't think of anything that would be more excited to share on this show. All right, Brad, next I want to play a voicemail that we got from Penny with some specific feedback on this episode.
Hi, Brad and Jonathan. Thank you for the episode on Special Needs Trust. I actually have a special needs trust. I was on disability for 16 years, and SSI, Medicaid, food stamps, heating assistance, you name it, I was on it. During that time, I honed my naturally frugal nature to being able to squeeze quite a bit out of each penny. Since then, I'm very happy to say that my health has improved. And for the last 12 years, I've been working in a full-time professional career. But I started working at 40, and so was always looking to try and figure out how much money I needed to save to have a reasonable traditional retirement. About 2 years ago, I stumbled into the financial independence community, and I haven't come up from the rabbit hole yet. In the meantime, a couple other things. I'm taking care of my dad, who has vascular dementia and is in assisted living. I'm fortunate that his finances are not a concern. His long-term care insurance is paying out, and he has a good pension. My mom, on the other hand, had to take an early retirement because of health issues. And so I'm planning into my plans, financial plans, to help her financially starting in a few years. So again, thank you for bringing up these issues of disability and how to take care of family members. I think it's a topic that is often overlooked, at least in the discussions I've been seeing in the financial independence community. Thanks again, and the fire is spreading.
Wow, Penny, thank you for the voicemail. Really appreciate you calling in, and I'm glad the episode resonated with you so significantly. It sounds like on many levels. So Jonathan and I realized very early on here that we are not the experts on any or everything probably, and we don't have a full range of all the life experiences that there are out there, right? Just by definition, we're living our own lives. And there's so many people out there who can A, enrich this community, and B, get value from other people who are living similar lives. And that's why we love having this platform where we can bring in experts and bring in people who have been researching these essential issues that maybe don't see the light of day all that often because every blogger or every podcaster is just living their own life. So again, thank you to you, Penny, and of course to William for this episode. I know it has enriched my life and opened me to issues that I didn't even know existed, honestly.
And it's interesting, Brad, I think when you're doing an episode, it's hard to appreciate the scope of everything that has been covered. But when you put it together, as someone that has, me and you personally recorded each episode, but then maybe from the perspective of a listener that found us maybe through episode 100, right? And then went back and listened to every single episode. When you come to the end of that and you realize like the breadth of knowledge that has been covered because of the guests that have been willing to come on this show and share their story, your life is forever changed.
Yeah, it unquestionably is. I know obviously it's impacted us significantly. Hopefully it's impacted many, many tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of people. And it's funny, Jonathan, because we actually had some people over yesterday, and I guess some of my friends do listen to the podcast, and some really had never even heard of it. And they asked me, where do you get started? And like you said, we've been sending people to episode 100 now, or we used to send people to episode 21 and 38, but that's almost not good enough in a sense for me, because it does build on every single episode, every single guest, all these experiences that people bring. Like, I hope that people go back and listen to every episode, even an episode like this, Jonathan. The title was Special Needs Trust, setting up a special needs trust. I suspect there are people who saw that title and maybe didn't listen because they thought that it didn't apply to them. But there's always those actionable takeaways.
And, I wonder if somebody listens to William's story and says, well, this is an outlier, somebody that made this choice. I would say that if you're in this community, this is almost a predictable path because you've built into your life options. I love that William saw the path that Scott Trench from Bigger Pockets, who, by the way, Brad, is he now the CEO of Bigger Pockets? That's a little sidebar there, but I think I just saw an announcement relatively recently.
Yeah, every time I get an email from Scott, in his signature, he has a new title, and it's like higher and higher up. So yeah, I think he's reached the top now.
I think that is the top. You can't go higher, right? That's the top. Congrats, Scott, if you're listening to this episode. But back to this. This is the inevitable outcome if you've built options into your life. And William heard Scott's story and heard the actionable takeaways from Scott's story and said, all right, I don't really have to work for this current employer for the money anymore. I'm doing it because I'm getting value and enjoyment from it. And frankly, I'm not really present anymore. I'm kind of present in these other opportunities. Is there a way for me to create a position for myself in something that I find myself very passionate about? Hearing that out, this is exactly what he did. And he's crafted a life for himself that doesn't involve going down and sitting on a beach, drinking your pina coladas, which, by the way, for those of you that are enjoying that, more power to you. I'm not judging you for it. I'm just saying for him, that wasn't it. he was looking for more and he found something. I think he uses the line, Brad, he tells me, I retired from corporate America. Is he retired? No. He's probably working just as hard on various other projects between what he's helping us with and what he's building on his own. He's got plenty of things that are happening right now, but these are all activities that bring value to his life. Will the internet retirement police, this nebulous body out there that tells you, well, you're not really retired, will they call him out? Yes. And I guess they should. But in my mind, it's not what are you retiring from? It's what are you retiring to? And I'm perfectly happy with you redefining retirement and saying, you know what? I am focusing on the activities that bring joy into my life. They may or may not bring money along with that. But if they do, I'm okay with it.
Yeah, Jonathan, it is financial independence. It's not retiring early. It's once you have that space, once you have that financial independence, you can find your passions, right? And William clearly did. He, as he said, when he was goofing off, right, quote, goofing off, he found himself in fire communities. He found himself helping. That was his passion, right? He discovered that. And that's the beauty. He didn't dislike his job. I mean, he described himself as a computer programmer. That's what he is at his heart. But he wanted to explore that on his own terms. He's describing also like why he left his job, right? He had reached FI technically for 4 to 5 years, but he looked at it and said he only got 2 weeks of vacation and it wasn't enough. Quote, I was feeling like I was a really good employee at the time, but not delivering up to the standards of being a good dad. So that's where early retirement surfaced, where I could be enjoying the limited time I have with my kids when they are young, rather than being so focused on work. And I mean, he was very clear. He really enjoyed his employer. They were extraordinarily flexible and great to him during the last handful of years. So this was not like, I hate my job, I'm running from it. It's quite the contrary. He found his passion and he ran towards it. That's the beauty of FI.
And Brad, in the episode, I mentioned that William is like a go-to source for me for very technical information. Like when I have a question about how to do something, how to implement something, this is a guy that I go to immediately. And I have personally gotten so much value from his answers, both ones that he has answered me directly, but also people on the Facebook group whose questions I've seen him answer, that I knew the show, ChooseFI, the show, would benefit from him being a recurring figure on these Friday roundups. So one of the things that we're going to be doing going into 2019, I'm not really telling you this, by the way, Brad. I'm telling our audience. I know you already know this. This is more just of a dialogue back and forth. But one of the things that we're going to do is we're going to take the more technical questions that we get and we're going to give them to William and give him a chance to do some research on them, give them a chance to thoroughly prepare. And then we're going to turn those into conversations on upcoming shows. And it's going to allow me and you to really use this platform to answer questions that maybe we would have been a little scared to touch, maybe in 2018 or 2017. But in 2019, right, this year, 2019 goals, we're hopefully going to get the opportunity to tackle much more technical questions on a regular basis as part of a conversation on our Friday Roundup format.
Yeah, it's going to be really exciting. And it's just wonderful to have people like William in our community. And this certainly isn't limited to William. If we have experts on certain topics, we're going to bring them in. And that's the beauty of having this crowdsourced platform. So yeah, it's wonderful. And I just wanted to touch, Jonathan, on one last thing where William was talking about these optimizations that he was making. And, he, under the worst circumstances, of course, had to start taking over the finances, I guess in 2014. And he realized how much he was spending on Edward Jones advisory fees and expense ratios. And he said, all of these low-hanging fruit optimizations, like changing his phone service, cutting his cable, were, quote, dwarfed by how much money I was annually spending on my investments. And so that's when I started realizing I needed to do a better job of being my own captain of my long-term investments. And I just thought that was a beautiful way to put it, that nobody's going to look out for you like you. You need to take ownership of this. Right. And ultimately, if it came down at the end that he had some knowledge and he still thought there was value in hiring out for certain things, that's perfectly fine. But you can't just go through life blissfully unaware, thinking that somebody else is going to have your best interests. It's just, sadly, it's not the way it works. So just educating yourself generally is always the starting point. So I was just really especially impressed with that.
And Brad, I wanted to take just a couple minutes and talk about William helping us behind the scenes. And I don't think we put as much emphasis on this as we could have, that he is a programmer with over 20 years of experience with one of the top 100 companies in the world. I mean, this is a guy with an incredible skill set. And what he wants to do with his quote unquote retirement is help us build something amazing for the financial independence community here at ChooseFI. What he is doing behind the scenes, we'll be able to announce, but I'll give you just a few things right now. He's helping us build an infrastructure to support our local groups. Now, as many of you already know, we very early on made it a focus to help build local community groups all around the country. Well, that's what we thought, all around the country. Now it's all around the world. There's well over 170 local groups in over 20 countries, which blows my mind when I just say it out loud. I can't believe that's actually a reality. By the way, if you're interested in joining a local group, finding a community of people, you can just go to choosefi.com/local, and you can find a full list of all of the local groups all around the world, and hopefully you'll be able to find one in your immediate geographic area. He's helping us polish that and making it more user-friendly. This is just something that me and you don't have the skill set to do. We don't have the skill set to tackle this, and to have someone like William being willing to help us build it from the ground up is just really a privilege.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And it's funny, as you were saying that, I went to choosefi.com/local and actually saw William's work. I honestly didn't realize it was live on the website right now. So yeah, it's neat to see what he's put together. And Jonathan, you and I are going to be focusing significantly on the local groups in 2019. I think that's something we've done a very good job of creating. A lot of our resources and time are going to go into the local groups from here on out, just because they are the lifeblood of this community. Having people there in your local community, meeting up, creating connections, who knows, finding a fellow entrepreneur that you want to start a company with. You never know where this can spin out to. I think that's just so essential. So yeah, I mean, this clearly is the first step, and we're going to do a lot better job in supporting and creating an environment to make these the best meetups and connections that we possibly can. So I think that's step one. And actually, since I was just at the website, I wanted to mention that we're in the process of overhauling the website. We have a new logo, a new look on ChooseFI.com, and there are a ton of articles that we're publishing pretty much every single day. It's just neat to see a lot of them get hundreds upon hundreds of shares on Facebook and Pinterest and Twitter. And we have a lot of really great writers who are of the FI community, who are just there, like I said, daily writing articles. So it's just so cool to see.
And Brad, I know one of those articles that just came out this past week was FI community events to check out in 2019, which is pretty cool because I think that you're going to be going to at least one of those.
Yeah. Hopefully many more. But I just kind of last minute decided to go to Camp FI Week 2 down in Florida. Actually, it starts, so this episode's coming out Friday, January 4th. And I'll be there a week from today, basically. So Friday, January 11th. I think there are actually some tickets left. I talked to Steven, and he said there were a handful of tickets left. I don't know if they'll still be there when this goes live, but I imagine they'll go pretty quickly. And it's just campfi.org. Check it out if you have any interest. But yeah, it's a nice, fun weekend of just kind of hanging out with people in the FI community. And I know Jonathan, you and I, that's where we got our start here on ChooseFI, is actually at Camp FI, Florida.
Yeah, it really was, man. And it's incredible how powerful networking is. I mean, we've mentioned this before, but I think you should absolutely consider going to an event like this to truly appreciate it. Getting involved either in your local community or going to a 3-day event like Camp FI or one of the longer events like Chautauqua is really an incredible experience. And I think it's something that you should definitely consider if you're looking to get more involved in the financial independence community. All right, Brad. Well, we are well over 30 minutes in, and I think maybe we should talk about the title of this episode.
So it kind of got away from us a little bit. Huh?
It's our first episode back of the new year. Give us a little bit of grace here. How to calculate your savings rate. And let me set the frame for this, that we say that the most important thing is your savings rate. And I realized this year when I was trying to go back and calculate my savings rate, it took me a little bit longer than I was expecting for multiple reasons that we get into. And then once I got farther down that path, I was increasingly aware that there are actually multiple ways to calculate your savings rate. And so your savings rate is both the most important thing for calculating your path to financial independence, but at the same time, as a comparative tool with you and maybe someone else, it's potentially meaningless. That was kind of like a aha moment. And I thought as a result of that, it would be worth me and you having a little dialogue to discuss how to calculate your savings rates, the kind of the different ways of doing it, and then what does it actually mean?
Yeah, no, I think it's a good topic, but I also think this is one of those topics that are fraught with peril to some degree because people line up on different sides of like, oh, that counts as savings rate or that doesn't, or oh, your calculations should start from here. And I think this is just a loose framework of maybe how you and I approach it, right?
Yes, I would say this is not the way or the only way. This is just our way. Because frankly, I'm just going to take whatever ideas you have and then make it my way. That's why I can say our way, because I need a process. This is going to be our way to calculate our savings rate. And I think for many people, they will get value from it.
Yeah, no, that sounds good. I think probably the starting point is how you track your finances. Before we even get to savings rate, it's, when we're recording this, it's January 2nd. And I know I just did my year-end financial statements. So I'm curious, like your starting point. Do you track your finance? I know you use personal capital and I do too to some degree, and that's all well and good, right? But do you track your finances in any other way?
Well, probably not to the same depth as you. I use Mint to track my spending and categorize everything over the year, and I use personal capital to track my net worth. So I have a pretty good net worth measurement, and I have a pretty good, consumption measurement with Mint. As we will highlight, I'm maybe missing a few other details that would make it easier to calculate my savings rate. Yeah, so basically I run these side by side, my consumption through Mint and track my net worth through personal capital. And then I would just bring in towards the end of the year, maybe my W-2 or last pay stub of the year. I try to use all of that to come up with the variables that I would need to use to calculate my savings rate. But for the sake of the show, I realized that I'd kind of like to get a more refined process, which is what drove this. And so I'll give the floor back to you because I want to hear more about your financial statements. But I just wanted to set the frame that when people say savings rate, there's actually like 3 or 4 different equations that could be referencing. And it can have a profound difference on your actual percentage. And this is important. I'm going to reference actually a little bit of this from an article that Big Earn from Early Retirement Now wrote back in 2017. And I'll put a link to it in the show notes for today's episode. But one way to calculate your savings rate could be on your gross total compensation. Everything that shows up on your W-2 and some that maybe doesn't, and divide that by how much you saved or invested in all of your various accounts. Now, this may be the most accurate, or it could be artificially low, especially if you're comparing it to maybe savings rate 2. Maybe somebody that is actually just looking at the take-home pay. This is the classic Mr. Money Mustache. He has a classic post on calculating your savings rate just based on take-home pay. Now, there could be a potential problem with this in that if you're just basing it on your take-home pay, it does not account for your pre-tax investments, right? I mean, you're not calculating what you're putting into your 401k or something else. If you have this very basic equation where your savings rate is what you save divided by your total income, the question is what makes up the save versus what makes up the income. That's the whole problem. And so if you're basing it on your take-home pay, you're saying your take-home pay is just what you saved plus whatever's in your 401k. But then in the denominator, right, what you made, you don't include what you put in your 401k. It's going to artificially inflate it. And again, you can reference this article if you want to see kind of how that worked. But I tested it, and it makes incredible differences in your savings rate. The third way of calculating your savings rate, and probably, Brad, this is probably going to be the most consistent and accurate, is to base it on your after-tax compensation, which is, frankly, at face value, sounds similar to the second equation, which was based on your take-home pay, but with one very important difference in that it calculates what you save. The top part of the equation, it puts any amount of money that you put into your 401k in the top half of the equation, but it also considers it as part of your denominator, right? Of what you made, what you were compensated. You include any money that you put into your 401k as part of your compensation. And that really helps balance out the equation. But the key here is, though, someone that is using the second equation compared to someone that's using this third equation, they could be making the exact same amount of money and they could be saving the exact same amount, but they're going to have vastly different savings rates. And obviously that would be frustrating if you are using a comparison and you are using different equations. And the reason I like the third equation as opposed to maybe looking at your total gross compensation is because there's so much on your W-2 that you frankly just can't control. So, I mean, we have the ability to some degree, manipulate our federal income tax by loading up our pre-tax buckets. I get that. But there's so much that's just out of your control. So Social Security, Medicare, state tax, federal unemployment tax, Virginia unemployment in our case, If you look on your actual W-2, you're just going to see line item after line item, potentially things that your employer may be giving you or compensating you as part of your package that frankly you have no say in. Another variable might be healthcare. You might decide to account for it because you chose a more expensive plan over a less expensive plan. Another individual might have healthcare completely covered. Someone else might have disability or life insurance through their employer. Do you include that in your calculation? Do you leave it out? I don't know if it really matters, except for two reasons. One, for you, for consistency year over year. And two, if you're comparing yourself to someone else. After-tax compensation for me gives me the ability to find the right balance. I cut off all the line items I can't control. I look at the remainder and I say, do I want to include that as part of my compensation package? So my denominator, right, which will help me decide or will in some way affect my savings rate. The more you include in that denominator, the lower your savings rate is going to be. All of those other little things that I have no control over, that would be included in my gross total compensation package, I ignore and I focus on my after-tax compensation and base my savings rate on that. I'll circle back to this fourth equation, which is probably the nerdiest of the four in a little bit. But for me, 3 is probably the sweet spot. All of these will have some variations in what your number actually is. And the key is, if you're comparing your number to someone else's number and they say, hey, we're doing this, but they're using a different equation than you are. And that's the key to this thing. If they're using a different equation than you are, it invalidates the whole thing. It's totally meaningless. And so part of it is that the savings rate is a meaningless tool when being used to compare yourself to someone else's. There's too many variables. You don't know what they're talking about. You probably shouldn't do it. But it's a phenomenal tool when comparing it to yourself year over year. And so if you have a process in place, if you've settled on an equation, one of these 3 or 4 different equations, then if you just use that process every single year, you're going to get better over time, right? You have a number. Now, next year you can do it. You can do a better job with it. So I spent actually several hours trying to aggregate all the information that I would need to create and find out what my savings rate actually is. And to put all that in perspective, you need to know your employer 401k, your HSA matching, your savings, your taxes, albeit at the payroll, federal, state, local income level, deductions, maybe for healthcare, transportation, other savings vehicles like your Roth and taxable accounts, and then obviously your consumption, right? You need all of that. And it's kind of hard if you don't have a plan to go back and get that information after the fact, unless you're actually looking at your W-2 or your tax return for the year. And so I realized that while I was able to cobble together a savings rate for myself, it might be useful to actually have a better plan going into 2019. All right, accountant, what's your plan?
All right, my plan, I have these Excel sheets that I call accounts and then the year. So last year that I just finished up was accounts 2018, and now I actually have to roll it over for 2019. But it really pretty much just has 3 tabs in it. And this is where I track my entire financial life, basically. So I have a P&L, which is profit and loss statement or income statement, whatever you want to call it. I have a net worth tab, and I have an accounts tab. This is where the data entry happens. And this is nowhere near as complicated as I'm going to make it sound, but it's
already making it sound complicated. But actually, anything following me is probably going to be less complicated, because what that chaos that I just unleashed a couple minutes ago was like painful to listen to from myself. So
Well, no, I hear you. And this is complex, right? But I do try to make it as simple as possible. I probably spend maybe 30 minutes a month just kind of tracking this. So on my accounts sheet, this is where, like I said, the entry occurs. So I just have columns. So across left to right, I have a column for each account that I have. So our checking account, our, investments like Lending Club that I used to have, and our business checking accounts, things like that, Vanguard taxable amounts, obviously, my 401ks and Roths and traditional areas, et cetera. So just really simply, every single account has its own column, okay? And it starts with the beginning of the year number. There's any activity as you go down this column, and then there's the end of the year. In essence, this is really, really simple. It's just you're looking at your account. What's the beginning of the year number? What's the activity, and what's the end of the year number? There's no crazy Excel nonsense going on. I don't have macros. I'm not running pivot tables or any, this is beyond me. It's just a simple sum formula in essence. So nothing complicated at all, but pretty much everything that I have cycles through our checking account. So I put all of the activity there. And as it goes down, I just have them categorized. So down to like the electric bill, and I have the 12 entries for the electric bill, and then have total electric for the year. So this way I can categorize my expenses, right? I can categorize my income. I have my mortgage. So I have my 12 mortgage payments. And just down the line, I have my credit cards, and I just put credit card, Chase Sapphire Preferred, credit card, Barclay Card Arrival Plus, and put the amount that I paid. Okay. So this is something that I just always tie. When I said it's 30 minutes a month, all that I do is I open up my checking account online and I open up my Excel sheet and I just put all the activity into my Excel sheet. There's probably a way to automate this. Honestly, like William, I'm sure is listening to this thinking I'm a crazy person.
You're going to get like 5 email suggestions from him.
Like, but it's fine. There's something about actually doing this myself. And it's interesting because I listened to a recent episode that Paula Pant put out on Afford Anything. And she actually described doing something like that also, that once a quarter, she puts everything into Excel. And she described it as this almost like, I don't know, cathartic maybe way of just like really feeling your finances. So I instantly related to that because that's exactly what I get from this. I know I can automate it. I know, like I said, William's head is exploding right now, but I get value from this. So if it's only 30 minutes a month, I can deal with that, right? So that's my mean sheet. And then naturally, any transfers that occur, like I just account for them, right? So if I had money in my checking account and I want to send it to Vanguard, well, I just put a minus in the column for my checking account and a plus in the column for Vanguard. And that accounts for the activity. So like I said, it's going to sound complicated, but this is really, really easy. There's nothing here. It's just, you're just following the activity and you're just summing up the categories.
So I want to clarify the one thing that was striking me. Does that mean that you literally are tracking every single credit card transaction over a 30-day period of time? Is that fair?
No. And what a great question, Jonathan. And it's funny because I just mentioned this to Laura since I just did the financials yesterday, is that this tracking probably doesn't give me the true insight that I need into our actual spending and our expenses. So it's a little bit frustrating, but like I made the determination a while ago that would be a bridge too far, going to my credit card statements and then transcribing them into this. Hopefully there is an automated way to do this. And this would actually help me significantly, is like to have that as an extra sheet in here that I could automate somehow, of saying like, this is what we spent at Wegmans. This is what we spent going out to dinner, and just kind of categorizing all of that, right? So it's there at a glance, as opposed to right now, I just have 20 or 30 lines for our 2018 credit card bills that we paid, right? And it doesn't give me any insight. So that actually is the one big failing of my sheet. But it was just that I didn't want to spend the time writing in every transaction. That was just something that would have just crushed me and turned this into a multi-hour a month ordeal that I just wasn't prepared to do. So I think it does give us a lot of insight. Again, I then have this P&L sheet, and that's a fancy way of saying it just pulls the cells from that account sheet, right? And it's just a summary of here's our income, here's our tax, here's our mortgage, and then credit cards, insurance, electric, gas, water, kids related, house related, and then miscellaneous expenses. And that's kind of how I track it. And that's just a really simple income statement, right? So I'm creating the Barrett family financial statements, but it's so easy, right? It's just drawing from that one account sheet. And then I just use that information where I need it here, right? For this income statement. And then I have a net worth statement, which just basically takes, like I said at the outset, I have those end of the year numbers for each account that I have. And then I just kind of lop them together. So I look at all of our cash and taxable savings and lump that together in one item. I have all my retirement accounts that I lump together in one item. I have my properties and our mortgages, then any other miscellaneous, and then I get my total net worth. So it's just all of my asset statements, all of my liability accounts, right? Which for us is basically just mortgages. But for many people, there might be student loans or other types of debt in there, right? But that's how you get your net worth. You just simply add up all your assets and subtract out your liabilities, and there you get your net worth. So this is a very robust spreadsheet, but it's simple. There's nothing that I took me great detail to set this up. It was just a matter of doing it. If I had waited 6 months or a year to do this, it would have been too laborious and I would have just stopped. But since I make it a regular part of my habit, I have it in Todoist as a recurring task every month just to tie out the financial sheet with our checking account. And the beautiful thing is I have this for posterity, right? So just looking, I actually switched these sheets up at the beginning of 2013, but on my net worth sheet, I have a quarterly amount for our net worth going back to January 1st, 2013. And it's really, really neat, Jonathan, to see the total, the year-to-date change, the quarterly change, and like that's just a simple formula, right? So once I set this thing up, it just works.
I got a couple other questions for you. So when I was really digging into my savings rate, there were a couple other things that I realized there were some flaws with my system or lack thereof. And one of them is I thought personal capital would really help me with this, but I realized that I hadn't actually tracked my contributions into my various investment accounts. I mean, I'd done them obviously, but I just had not written down the exact amount. And when I was trying to go back and find out how much I'd actually invested in these various vehicles, it's showing me the current value and it's showing me dividend income and reinvested dividends and all this other stuff. It was hard for me to actually go back and track my contributions. So I realize now that if I had just written down my contributions on a sheet like you're describing, that would have absolutely made my life much easier. And I guess that's kind of what you do. You have all of your contributions to your investment vehicles on this sheet.
Yep, that's exactly right. And that's how when I said I have that like transfer, right? So it's naturally, it's coming out of my checking account and it's going into whatever other account it is. So that all gets kind of scooped up into, I have this savings column here on my income statement. And it's just like the change in that account. That does capture everything. But yeah, the lower tech way of doing it is, like you said, just kind of write it down and it should be pretty simple. Like, hey, I sent $6,000 to Vanguard this month or this quarter or whatever it is. And that's part of your savings, right? So I just like to, it's the accountant's brain in me. I like to tie everything out. So I have that income or the profit and loss, right? Hopefully it's not a loss, but my income.
Profit sheet. You have your profit sheet.
Yeah, exactly. It's the business of Barrett here, but no, it's I think going back to the ultimate question of how do we calculate our savings rate? I think that's the key. I personally, at least based on how you described it, I take the third method. I base it on after-tax compensation.
Yeah, and that's the one that I settled on as well. It seemed like it was the most accurate. I mean, if you really want to nerd out on this, which there will be individuals that want to do this, and you want to get it super precise, there's a fourth savings rate, which I didn't really mention, but basically it's based on the after-tax total compensation, but then you adjust for deferred taxes, right? Because $1 that you save in your taxable accounts isn't necessarily going to be the same as $1 that you save in your pre-tax, because when you draw it out, you could theoretically have to pay taxes on that. That's like a bridge too far for me. I'm just focused on my after-tax compensation. I consider $1 that I save in my pre-tax the same as $1 that I save in my bank account. And, while that may or may not be perfect when I'm comparing it to another individual, it's amazing for myself because I can keep doing the same thing year over year. So if this year I save 30% and the next year I save 40%, as long as it's based on that same anchor, that's perfect. I just think that going through this mental thought process is a really valuable use of your time, especially because if you haven't been doing the business of Barrett Excel sheet, which we'll come back to in a second, you're going to be scrambling to get all of this information. And one of the easiest ways to get enough of it to form this sheet, if you haven't been tracking it all year long, is either your W-2 or even better, your tax return at the end of the year.
Yeah, you're right. And it's interesting, Jonathan, how you describe that as a bridge too far, right? Of doing that kind of convoluted calculation of pre-tax, after-tax, deferred tax, all that other nonsense. I looked at it the exact same way, and all the while realizing that this is not as precise as it possibly can be, but it's good enough for me. Because the key point, and I hope that got through, is your money that comes through to you that's just sitting in your bank account is slightly different than money in your 401k, because theoretically you're going to have to pay taxes on that money in your 401k at some point, at some rate. Those are not an apples to apples thing, but I can't calculate that now. So I just consider any savings. And that to me is certainly good enough. So it's just my total gross compensation less the taxes that I'm paying this year gets me to my denominator. And that's my starting point. That's the money that I have to play with. And I get to decide how that money is spent or saved. And I think that's a very logical starting point for me.
I bet you William does savings rate number 4. I can almost guarantee it. All right. Hey, we will continue to create more resources around this. I think that this is an important conversation, and you can't at the same time say the savings rate is the most important thing, and then the second, not talk about it at all. So I think this is just how I would do it going forward. And I would tell you the two things that I ran into, and I was trying to create this for myself, was one, tracking your consumption and then divvying up whether or not you're considering that, a true consumption or something. Just that nailing down what is actually consumption is a big piece of this. And you can use a tool like Mint to aggregate that information. If you've done a good job categorizing things, that can be very valuable. And then two, it's a little bit of a pain to go back and track those contributions to your account. So a sheet like Brad was talking about that has every contribution you made in one place is just going to save you a lot of time. You tie that to your taxes at the end of the year or your W-2 sheet, and you're going to be in a really good place to get your savings rate calculated for 2019. And once you have it this year, you can just totally crush it next year, do even better. So I think that's a great place to start. Brad, one question for you. I know you have created this sheet. Would you be willing, maybe you could just go through it and kind of remove some of the explicit details, maybe just base it on like a $50,000 a year budget, but would you be willing to create a version for us of that we could share with the community for people that kind of want to use your profit statement as a way to track their net worth going forward?
Yeah, that's a really cool idea. Since we're recording this on Wednesday, I'm not sure I can get this ready for the show notes right away.
I'll give you 2 weeks.
But yeah, no, we should definitely do that. And we should send it out in one of our Tuesday ChooseFI Insider emails, right?
Oh, yeah, that's a great idea. Okay, so if you're on the email list, as soon as Brad has got this thing created, we will absolutely get it included in there so that you can get a copy of it. And for those of you that want to get on that email list, you can just go to ChooseFI.com, and there is a place to sign up for our email right there. Or even faster, you can just go to ChooseFI.com/vault, and you can access all of the resources that have been put together for you over the last 2 years. That's ChooseFI.com/vault, VAULT.
Yeah. And Jonathan, just two super quick things. I actually do include my payments to mortgage principal and any debt payments in my savings rate. So I think this is something that people kind of have questions about or differences of opinion, but I look at anything that increases my net worth as savings. So I take the mortgage principal amount of my actual mortgage payment each month and include that as savings. So if I had student loans, I would do the exact same. Any amount that went to principal that increased my net worth, that would count as savings for me. And also, we did mention very quickly in passing Personal Capital. That's a really robust tool that you and I both recommend significantly. And yeah, if anybody's interested in signing up, it's just ChooseFI.com/PC for Personal Capital. ChooseFI.com/PC.
Yeah, if you want to avoid all the craziness that Brad was talking about with this profit loss statement, you just want to track your net worth, Personal Capital is your best friend. It does a remarkable job. Unfortunately, as I came to realize, tracking your savings rate, it leaves a little bit to be desired, and that's where Brad's system is definitely better, and I'm going to hop on that bandwagon too. All right, guys. Well, unfortunately, that's going to bring this episode to a close. Now, as you know, we like to finish every episode by doing a drawing for a copy of a book that we have found useful. There's 3 books that we offer. The first is J.L. Collins' book, The Simple Path to Wealth. The second is Dominic Cortuccio's book, Design Your Future. And the third book from Vincent Puglisi, Freelance to Freedom. If you want to enter the drawing to win a copy of one of these books, all you need to do is just go to ChooseFI.com/iTunes, follow the instructions there, and leave us a short written review. Send us an email to feedback@ChooseFI.com, letting us know that you left a review and what screen name you left it under. We give away 1 book for every 5 written reviews that we get, and we announce a winner on the Friday Roundup. Brad, how many winners do we have today?
All right, Jonathan, we have 2 winners today. And the first winner is Boyd. And Boyd said, "You guys are brilliant. We are still a few years away from reaching 5, but so many things you guys are talking about I've had success with, such as taking our family to Disney on travel points or learning the life hacks like how to replace my roof shed. I felt like a loner sometimes trying to figure these things out. You guys have put it to words, and more importantly, it is a community of like-minded people who feel that they have so much more to give than being stuck on the hamster wheel. Way to go and keep going. Friends from Canada." Very cool, boy.
So awesome.
All right. And Jonathan, the second winner is Vincent.
And Vincent says, "Best financial independence podcast around. I binge listened to your entire podcast in a few weeks. Physicians are notorious for making bad financial decisions, but your podcast encouraged me to think outside the box. Upon graduating from my surgical fellowship, I moved into a 100 square foot tiny house rental on someone else's property in order to start my path to financial independence. Using your advice, I maxed out my wife and my 401k, funded our backdoor Roth IRAs, invested in my wife's HSA, refinanced over $400,000 in student loans with the goal to pay them off in 4 years, and placed over 50% of my take-home pay into our taxable retirement account with Vanguard. Brad and Jonathan work remarkably well together to produce interesting content, to ask interviewees the right questions, and to lead a movement that is revolutionizing the way people early in their careers will view life in retirement. While every episode does not pertain to me, I am always entertained and pull all the levers that help me improve my health and wellness. Now a flexitarian, maximizing our savings and invest in a simple, time-tested manner. Thank you for all the amazing things you guys do. My wife is now on board and the fire is burning. All right, man, that is awesome. And getting your wife on board is huge. All right, my friends, you heard him. The fire is burning. We'll see you next time as we continue to go down the road less traveled.
You've been listening to ChooseFI Radio Podcast, where we help middle-class America build wealth, one life hack at a time.